Great. It shows this live on our YouTube page. I do see that we're also live on Facebook, so we'll just check and make sure that that's accurate. Check and make sure. There it is. Oh, I'm so happy. Facebook had changed some of their functions right when I finally learned how to share things out. They took away the feature the other day, so I couldn't share out the message, but it's fixed now. All right, well, let's get this kicked off. I did just start seeing some people hop on here, and I finished sharing it off on our end. So good morning and happy Wednesday to all of you. Thank you for tuning in to our broadcast. If you are watching this at a later point in time, whether it's the afternoon or evening, you can always give us a hashtag replay so we know that you tuned in. And that way, if you do ask a question, we can be able to locate it quite quickly. Of course, you can find all of the videos in the video section here on our Facebook page or our YouTube channel. They date back into 2020 when we first launched these live broadcasts to help you. So if you are ever bored or want to binge watch our videos instead of Netflix, I would personally appreciate that. And you can find those at any point in time to rewind, rewatch, and replay. Now, if you are a first-time viewer on our videos, then I want to ask you to hit the like button on our page or the subscribe button on our YouTube channel. You can also make sure that you get alerted when we go live in the future by selecting the notifications tab and selecting the follow button right below that. And Facebook will alert you when we not only go live, but when we post content into the future as well. Now, you can find us on all of our social media platforms on Instagram and Twitter at Westy Chamber. We're also on LinkedIn, YouTube, Westminster Chamber of Commerce, and of course here on our Facebook channel. And if you've never gone to our page before, then I'll just quickly flash our website for you. That's westminsterchamber.biz, host of resources for our businesses. It also covers what programs, events are coming up, and just major happenings in our community through the news release section. Now, if you are a returning viewer, then you already know my quick ask for you, and that's to hit the share button on this video so others in your network can start seeing that we're live, can also drop what they're doing and tune in with us for a few minutes. The video allows you to engage with us, and this is the number one way that we can respond to questions or comments is through the chat section. So whether you're watching it on your phone, it's right below the video, or if you're on your computer, you can also find it there as well. You can type in any comments. We'll be able to pull up your name, your photo. So hopefully it's something that you are not embarrassed about and you're just proud of. And then of course, whatever that comment is, as Parker has already done with a nice good morning message our way. Of course, if you're not wanting to comment, you can also react to the video. We appreciate thumbs up, hearts. You can give us an angry emoji, but then I'll be wondering why why that's the case. So any of the other ones are preferred. So I see Emilio on here with us. He's already reacted to the video and let us know he's tuned in. But today is our feature that is really to introduce our newer partners into the chamber. We've branded it as a network welcome on Wednesdays, and we allow for them to come on here and give an idea of who they are, what their business actually does, and ways that you can work with them or be aware of them in our community. And for the most part, because we are such a small business community, a strong percentage of our business members are small business owners. So today, I'm very pleased to have with me Bill Rigler. Bill, thank you so much for hopping onto this broadcast.
Thank you. Yeah, it's great to be here. And hello, everyone.
Of course. Well, I always like to kick them off and let them know that the primary reason we want you on here is for them to see the face behind the company. Oftentimes we see a brand or we see a business and we don't really know the nuances or who's running it, who's leading it. And this kind of just personalizes it. People like to get to know one another, and they do business with those that they know, like, and trust. So before I have you really start explaining about yourself, because I'm starting to see a few folks that are quickly commenting, I don't want to lose sight of them. Christina's another small business owner in our community, and she was welcoming you, of course, to the chamber. It is going to be an awesome day. Speak it into existence. I fully affirm that as well. And then, of course, Jessica Preston is tuned in with us. Welcoming you, Bill, onto this broadcast. Now, tell us a little bit about who Bill Rigler is.
I am a public relations and public affairs professional in my day job, but more than anything, I am a cyclist. I am an outdoor enthusiast. I was born and raised in Montana. I spent 15 years in New York City before moving to Colorado 10 years ago. And so I've slowly been transitioning all the black clothing that's perfect for New York City nightlife out of my box, and have been slowly upgrading to flannels and Patagonia and Arc'teryx and all the outdoor gear that helps me blend in. Of course, I have a couple of puffy vests as well that I use every now and then as well. But I will say that one of the things that I love about living in Colorado that's really been reignited for me, especially after having lived in New York City and Washington, D.C. and Chicago, is that there is such a give first mentality in Colorado, and it just speaks to my soul. And it is so rewarding to work with and to volunteer with and be around with so many other talented individuals from all over the country who by choice have picked Colorado as their home. And it's just such a lovely ecosystem on every possible level. And so I'm very happy personally and professionally, and I love working with dynamic people and companies. So.
Absolutely. Well, I always like to say Colorado is like its own melting pot, because we have such a diversity of people that come from all over. But we all kind of mesh together, and we're guided here for a particular reason. So glad to have you here in Colorado. I am going to start picking apart a few of your comments that you referenced.
Perfect.
You shared that you cycle, or you're a bicyclist. Have you gone into any of those races? Are you someone who's avidly on one of the main highways that we should avoid hitting, or tell us what that looks like?
Yeah, at an earlier stage in my life, I routinely shaved my legs and spandexed up, and was one of those guys who you would be so annoyed by when you saw. But when I was in New York City, I kind of started out. I was having a quarter life crisis. I started doing triathlons as a way to stay in shape and meet new people. I discovered that I hated running, I hated swimming, but I really did love the cycling. And believe it or not, New York City is such a wonderful place to go cycling between Central Park and once you go over the bridge into New Jersey and New York State. It was fantastic. When I moved to Colorado, I thought it would be such a great transition in terms of meeting new people and getting oriented. And what I quickly learned was that, the people here are just from a different gene pool. I mean, I found that, there's a big difference between spending time at sea level versus being born at altitude and being able to race and train. And so I very quickly realized that I was just feeding the egos of people that I was racing and training with. So I backed it up considerably. So I still do a lot of road riding, but I've really recently discovered gravel biking, which has been spectacular. And I do a lot of mountain biking as well. I'm also on the board of a couple of local nonprofit organizations that focus on cyclists giving back and interacting responsibly with the community.
Oh, I love that. I love that engagement. And I think that's the perfect way of saying that you've bowed out of it, right? And stopped feeding their egos. That's a
Yeah,
really nice way of putting it.
yeah.
John, I see you tuned in with us. Thank you for hopping on. Bill, you studied also in Montana, or you had studied in New York?
So I was born and raised in Montana. I was the black sheep in my family. I was the only person to not go to school at the University of Montana, for
Okay.
which I've been ostracized. But I ended up doing my undergrad at the University of Chicago, and then I ended up doing my graduate school in international relations at New York City at Columbia University. And in fact, my first week of grad school was 9/11.
Oh my
So it was
gosh.
what the transformative moment for all of us studying, but for many of us, myself included, it created an immediate pivot toward national security. And for many of my classmates and myself, there was this acknowledgement and realization that there was never a more important time for us to be good at what we do. And so I think that was a charge that many of us took very, very seriously. And I had classmates who went to the CIA, the State Department, the Pentagon, and respective nonprofits, both in the U.S. and abroad.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you and I share that grad degree. That's funny that we're just now finding that out together.
Yeah, I love it.
But it makes sense because a lot of peers ended up going into kind of the Peace Corps or State Department or even other UNAID and
Yeah,
those similar agencies. So that's exciting. It is an unfortunate time that of course you started the grad school, but it's funny because everyone remembers exactly where they were at that particular moment. And so I
yeah.
think that's kind of been ironed into your brain and your mindset. So you mentioned to me briefly that you're in public affairs, or that's kind of your professional hat. What has that manifested into over the last few months, maybe years?
I think that, because I started out in international affairs and, we were focusing on big picture issues like reducing malaria or making sure that young girls were able to go to school and not get married off when they were 12 years old. And so what I was able to see just kind of when I was working both on those issues, but operating at a really, really high level. So it was not uncommon to be routinely working with senior ministers or even heads of state on a lot of the projects that I was working on. And so I think from that, I kind of took an awareness that on the one hand, what is required to effectuate some of these public outcomes is that whether that's getting the right group of stakeholders at the table, whether that's very clearly messaging what you're trying to do, whether that's coming up with the funding required to put these new public policies into place. And over the years, I was able to kind of backtrack almost, if you will, into more of a public relations and spokesperson role. So I have no formal training. I've never even taken a class in journalism, public relations, communications. It just really all sort of started to come together for me. And I was able to see at some level kind of what the whole chessboard looked like. And so I've been able, either through design or by accident, to be able to draw upon a really diverse background that includes lobbying, public affairs, public relations, and international advocacy work. And I've been able to kind of bring that into the focus with my new company. And now I'm in a position to help clients, and as well as a lot of pro bono work that I do to make good things happen for good people.
I would say it is by design, because you have this natural learner ability, and anything that you have gotten your hands into, you've just been so eager to learn more and do more with it that it's kind of coalesced into this toolkit that you now have and are able to really implement it.
Thank you.
And Jessica provided a really nice comment for us, and she was just kind of quickly sharing that we're so glad to have you in our community, and that you've
Thank you.
got a heart of gold. So that's wonderful. Thank you so much for that comment,
Thank
Jessica.
you.
Very much appreciate it. So how long ago did you start Greenlight Strategy? So now this is your business, and this is really your child that you've been growing over the last. You can go ahead and fill me in.
Yeah, so I initially moved to Colorado 10 years ago to work as the spokesman and director of communications for former Vice President Al Gore at his Global Climate Change Initiative. I then followed that up by being the director of public relations at Ball Aerospace, followed by a pretty lengthy stint at a Boulder-based public relations firm specializing in working with tech startups. And throughout that time, I was always kind of thinking like, I feel like I can do more. And I also recognize enough about myself to know that I just don't work well in large bureaucracies. And it was really due to COVID that I had this epiphany that maybe all of these people who are participating in the Great Resignation are onto something. And a few weeks before I left the PR firm that I was at, my wife and I took a road trip down to Santa Fe, and it was the first time that we had been down there. And so for that long drive, for anyone who's done it, you know that you have a lot of time in the car. And so we ended up getting Matthew McConaughey's book, Green Lights. And truth be told, I think part of the reason why we got it was that she wanted 6 hours of listening to Matthew McConaughey. And I was perhaps less interested. And it was, I believe strongly that books come into your life at the right time. And for me, the revelation was that, Matthew McConaughey was saying, life is about red lights, yellow lights, and green lights. And whether that's a relationship, a job, or something else, if you're at a red light, you're stuck, right? And you can't seem to get out of it. If you're at a yellow light, you're slowing down. And what he's really described in his book is that for him, he's been able to successfully navigate all of the green lights so that he's in this constant flow state, and he's been able to tune out all the noise, all the distractions, and he doesn't spend a lot of time looking in the green light or looking in the rear view mirror. And so a few weeks later, I decided that this was it. I was going to go out on my own. A couple days after that, I was in the shower, and as most great ideas happen there. I ran out of the shower, and my wife was like, "What's going on?" And I said, "Green Light Strategy. That's going to be the name of my company." And so from there, it's kind of taken on a life of its own. And our mission at Green Light Strategy is to help land use projects move forward. So for me, it's been this great combination of purpose and passion. And I can honestly say I never thought that I would have been a businessman or an entrepreneur before this. And I'm so happy that I've taken the jump, and it's been really, really both a very affirming opportunity, but also it's been made much easier by great friends and colleagues like the Westminster Chamber, like the Boulder Chamber, and just an army of mentors who have helped me along the way.
Absolutely. Well, I love that story and the background behind the name of your company and how it originated. And when you were speaking about the mirrors and the rear view mirror, it reminded me of a quote that I'd read, and it was, there's a reason why your rear view mirror is smaller than your windshield, right? And the idea behind that is to, of course, always, what's on the horizon and what's ahead is definitely where you should be drawing your attention, and not behind us and what could have been or that regret pool. So
totally.
Inspiring that you kind of took that on. Now, you shared that you cater toward kind of the land use types of clients. Are there other types of clients that you work with? Is it all larger types of organizations or individuals, or do you also take on some other diverse interests?
Yeah, definitely take on a diverse set of interests. And so, owing to my background in working, with a lot of nonprofits, for example, I will frequently assist nonprofits with pro bono public relations support that will include everything from media training to providing guidance on how to more effectively use social media. Crisis communications has been something that I've spent years and years working on. But for me, the land use piece is particularly personal. Several years ago, I ran for city council in Boulder, and when I ran, it occurred to me that if I had won, and thank God I didn't, but if I had won, I would have been the first renter on Boulder City Council in more than 5 decades, in a town where more than 50% of the population rents. And as I've come to know the communities across the Front Range better, I was seeing that my circumstance was not unique to me, but rather there was a giant set of people whose voice was being diminished. And where the land use pieces became really important for me was that, as I started working on land use projects, which includes the approval of both workforce housing, affordable housing, as well as mixed use developments, what I was seeing was that all across the Front Range, the tactics being utilized by the NIMBYs, or the not in my backyards, was effectively exactly the same in every community. There were concerns about too much traffic, declining home values, concerns about personal security and safety. And it occurred to me that the reason why these tactics are being used, regardless of the location, is because they've always worked up until now. And it felt like these tactics, a lot of which are, are scare tactics, and many of which are, let's be honest, they tend to have some level of dishonesty associated with them. It felt to me like there had been, again, never been a more important time for me to be good at what I did, to help advance the legitimate housing and economic interests of a lot of these companies that were trying to build something better, but do so in a responsible and environmentally sustainable way.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head when you were talking about your experience and being a renter and would have been the only individual kind of renting on council. And that's this mindset that there is going to be this huge amount of influx of people, when there are a great amount of people that are renting that would really love to own. They just don't have that opportunity. And so
Completely. Yeah.
it's creating that for them. And it's counteracting what a lot of this idea around, okay, if we build it, then more people will come, as opposed to it's allowing more of a leveled playing field. So we're at the point in the broadcast that I always like to throw at you myths for your particular industry. And I and I
Perfect.
like to have you kind of debunk those along the way and help in educating people that may be feeling that those are myths or things that they also believe about your line of work. Before I do that, I just want to give a quick shout out to Michael. I hope you're feeling better. And thank you, Carol, for hopping on here as well and tuning in with us. We have Bill Regler from Greenlight Strategies giving a quick update on his business, how he created it, who he is. And now we're at the point that we're asking him some questions around PR and what myths are out there. Are they actually true? Are they not? And if they're not, let's try and answer them for folks. And the first is that PR is only for larger companies.
Myth.
Okay. And I know you touched on this slightly when you shared that you do a lot of work with nonprofits. But, why is this out there? And what can you speak to on this? Does everyone need to have some sort of a PR strategy?
Yeah. So the number one lesson that I like to share, and I think that this is true of nonprofits, for profits, and everything in between, is that if you are not actively managing your organization's reputation, other people will do it for you. And so if you're a nonprofit organization or a startup, think about what this means in terms of relations with donors, relations with investors, relations with customers, right? And so oftentimes what we see is that organizations like nonprofits, for example, will say, we don't have the time or budget to tell people what it is that we're doing. We don't have the time or budget to keep our website updated. We saw this most often during, a lot of the closures related to the pandemic, where you had restaurants and shops that weren't even keeping their Google listings or their Yelp listings updated for their hours of operation, right? So there are a lot of really quick and easy tweaks that can be made primarily online that can reinforce who you are as a company, where your values are vis-a-vis your donors, stakeholders, and investors. And also make sure that you're not letting bad news perpetuate or become fact, right? Just simply because you're not responding to it. So I think it's always best to be proactive
Right.
in terms of managing your reputation. And it's never been easier to do that. There's so many platforms to do that from.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it. And thank you so much for answering that. I see a quick comment that's come our way from one of our past chairmen, and that's Brian Head. And I don't know if you've buttered these people up, Bill, or what exactly, but they are giving you some love this morning. He's sharing that he
I
has
love
an
it.
opportunity to work with you and that he can speak to the fact that you're at the top of your industry. So great to have him involved in the chamber. Of course, we are very excited to have you and plugged in with us
Thank you,
as
bro.
well. So here's another quick myth that I want to throw our way, and that's any startup doesn't need PR. So the idea behind that is that, you have to have matured or been around for a number of years or months to quantify or qualify why you should have a PR strategy. And you kind of knocked that out with this last one as well.
Well, I think it's important to understand when, especially if you're in startup mode, what is a reasonable expectation around PR, and more importantly, being able to clarify what your value proposition is. And so on that first point, the number of times that I had a 3-person startup come to me and say, can you help us get in TechCrunch or Wired magazine? And the answer is absolutely not. I mean, these publications get pitched, thousands of times a day, and unless you're coming in with a really strong value proposition and a really strong product, you're probably not going to see the light of day. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be doing any PR. And fundamentally, what I really try and work on with companies and organizations is helping them better understand what their core messaging is. And so, whether you're a company or a nonprofit, I try and present this as a Venn diagram, right? So think of 2 circles, right? So one circle up on top here is, what are all the things that I want to talk about? And I would say that circle is primarily where 99.9% of companies and organizations reside. However, there's another circle right below that that's much bigger, and that circle is, what do people want to hear? And so I really see my role as on the public affairs and the public relations side in helping those organizations move purely from the what do I want to talk about and more into that sweet spot. So you're overlapping with what do I want to talk about and what do people want to hear. Once you have the foundation of that message on board, that then gives you kind of the framework to be able to repeat that on social media, on your website, in your pitches to investors, on your presentation decks. And it's really through that repetition and that messaging that connects with the audiences that is going to catapult your public relations efforts. But I would say also just, PR does not need to be expensive, right? I mean, you don't need to be taking out thousands and thousands of dollars of advertising. You don't need to be, getting influencers or brand ambassadors. It may work for your company, but if you're a startup, that may be beyond your budget.
So here's another one for you. And by the way, your answers have like hit some of the other ones that I was going to ask around, if I don't have a story, and even like, is content more valuable than the platform? And I think you've touched on those significantly. But this next one is that PR does not sell. So the idea behind this, of course, that you're putting in this money, but it doesn't actually increase your bank account. Can you speak directly around that?
Yeah, so I think that there's probably some truth to that. And I think that a lot of public relations experts would, or professionals would say, the role of public relations is not to sell products. It's to improve the reputation of your company, to improve the reputation of your product. And more importantly, it's really intended to position the company as a trusted messenger. Whenever I lead media trainings, the first question that I always ask in every exercise is, give me 3 brands you admire and tell me why. Almost everybody says Nike, almost everybody says Apple, and sometimes we hear Tesla or some local folks, but oftentimes the brand values that people talk about that really resonate with them are that, it's really easy to use, it's clean design, it's all of these things. And at the end of the day, this is where effective public relations can really assist in helping to tell that story. The other thing that I want to point out, just in terms of the difference between advertising and marketing, is, well-placed and strategic public relations can actually help move product or your services. And let me give you an example. So when was the last time you bought a vehicle or bought anything because you saw an ad in the paper or online? Right? So compare that experience versus getting a testimonial from 3 people who you know or respect saying, I just bought this product and I think it's incredible and I highly recommend it. You're more likely to go after the views of people who you respect and admire, or at least know. And that's really where public relations can come in handy in terms of helping to bridge that gap. So it's much more personal feel.
Right. And again, you've touched on that it doesn't have to be costly. And then I think it was really nice for you to differentiate the marketing advertising as opposed to PR. It's not replacing your salespeople or any of those other components that you can be doing. It's kind of in addition to that. I'll leave us with this last myth. And I know it's a myth because I feel like you're a little bit busier than this, but PR equals press releases. So that is the only thing that they get out of doing business with you, Bill.
That is the number one lesson from today, is that PR does not equal press releases. I've had clients who have been able to generate on an annual basis hundreds of pieces of media coverage, and not once did they put out a press release. So, a lot of people, I think that, okay, if I do a press release and I spend $300 and I put it on a wire distribution service like PR Newswire or Business Wire, then they will come, right? And that's just not the way that the news business works anymore. So when we think about public relations, we think about a couple of different levels. Press release is a component of that. Thought leadership is an increasingly important component of that. So whether you're doing a blog post off of a blog, whether you're doing a larger form essay on LinkedIn and posting as yourself or on behalf of your company, if you're doing social media posts, or even if you're doing YouTube video, or even TikTok videos these days. I mean, there are lots of opportunities for you to establish your brand's identity and connect with the people that you want. One thing that I think is really important when we talk about PR as well is that it's a dramatically different landscape than it was even 5 years ago. And so as an example, 3 years ago, the Denver Post had almost 200 journalists on staff. Because of cutbacks and the parent company who owns the Denver Post, the Boulder Daily Camera, the Longmont Times Call, and others, the Denver Post staff is now about 60 journalists. So what that means is that there are fewer journalists than ever before, with a lower bandwidth than ever before, and they're trying to crank out the stories faster than ever without having the in-depth and insightful coverage that we've all come to know and understand. So what that means really is that, any outreach to journalists has got to be really buttoned up. It's got to be a really crisp pitch and message, and it's got to be really tightly controlled in a very disciplined approach. It is awfully hard to come back from a really bad interview that you didn't prepare for, or that you said the wrong thing and were taken out of context.
Yeah, all of these are great tips, and thank you so much for debunking these myths and helping to educate people along the way about your line of work and how it can apply to them. I also see a precious child is tuning in. Thank you guys for all the work that you're doing in and around our community and across the state of Colorado. Bill, what is the best way that people can find out more information about you or reach out to you directly?
So my website is greenlightpublicaffairs.com. Again, we're a boutique public affairs firm working across the Front Range. I'm also on LinkedIn as Bill Rigler, and Greenlight Strategy has also got its own page on LinkedIn. So please check us out, and we'd love to talk with you and see if we can help, either formally or on a pro bono basis.
Of course. We're here to help. I'm also going to quickly flash your phone number for folks that are tuned in. So if you are trying to reach Bill directly, his phone number and his website have both been included in the comment section. If you are watching this later on and you thought of a question that you didn't get a chance to ask us, you can always type that into the chat and we'll get it over to Bill and he can follow up with you directly. But the moral of today's broadcast, of course, was to learn about Bill and Greenlight Strategy and see more to him and his business than meets the eye. And I have thoroughly enjoyed spending the day or morning with you, Bill. But I think everyone that's tuned in, we've seen a variety of a different audience on here with us today, and very grateful for that. So please continue to share the message out to your networks by hitting the share button on this video. Enjoy the rest of your afternoons. We'll be back on here on Friday with an update from the talent pipeline and that report as it relates to workforce development. But Bill, I appreciate you being on here with us today.
Thank you so much. I love the Westview Chamber. I'm so happy to be a member, and just so grateful for all the support and the partnership and mentorship that I've received so far from the Chamber. So I can't wait to do a lot more.
Thank you.